It's not all of Boston.
No, it's a lot of Boston, though. You have Dorchester here. You have the street I grew up on here, Freeport and Marcy Boulevard. You can do a mixed use there. You know, this kind of corridor here. This is like what used to be alongside the highway. You know, you get some opportunities there to do some more development. I think we could look at right around here in the Dudley area, possibly some opportunities for light manufacturing to give folks the opportunity to get a job and be able to buy some housing. And he's taking chicken wings over there.
Yeah.
This is the Fenway area. You know, a lot of the folks in the Fenway and the college universities, I think that, you know, a lot of those folks feel overburdened already. But I would like to see the universities. Northeastern is one. Let me think. That's the hospital industry here. You know, put more housing on campus. City Hall right here. I have a plan, a proposal to take the 4.5 acres of land here, put it out for a request for proposal so that somebody can come in and develop this land here. And that's in downtown Boston. And it connects Government Center, the financial district, and downtown Crossing. Kind of connects it all. There's a lot of things we could do.
Okay, well, after a campaign event in Roxbury, WGBH News reporter Ann Mosto asked John Connolly to look at the same map and outline some of his development ideas.
The map picks up really the inner core of Boston, but if we look sort of in this rough area along Columbia Road, you're going to come in with the Fairmount line, and you're going to come into South Station. And this presents, to me, a great opportunity to experiment with the housing demands that the next mayor is going to face. The transit nodes along the Fairmount line are going to present that opportunity to experiment with height and density. Also look at real discussions around parking requirement so that we can bring costs down and try and price to the workforce and to the middle market, along with the affordable component. But here's what we've got to be on guard for. We have lifelong residents of the Dudley Square area who are, struggling to make ends meet. And, we're already seeing some developers go in and buy up housing stock here that's going to ultimately, without a smart policy, all be converted to luxury condominiums. So the challenge is, how do we maintain a socioeconomic mix? And this area presents a great challenge there, and really the prime example, but it's the question for everywhere in Boston. How are we going to have a housing policy that can allow everyone to get to home ownership?
All right, my first guest has been following the mayoral race with laser focus. Peter Kansas is a political analyst here at WGBH, former editor of the now defunct Boston Phoenix. If somebody handed me one of those maps, I'd be going, what, huh? I have to say, Marty Walsh, who's a state rep, you'd think he'd be only focused on his district, was so fluent in all of the neighborhoods, he knew exactly, he was zeroing in. I mean, John Connolly wasn't bad either, but Marty seemed to have a bigger picture.
Listen, this is Marty Walsh's issue. When I've been on the show before talking about education, just as education is Conley's issue, this is Walsh's. Now, both of them have very similar ideas, very similar frame of mind, but what Marty Walsh has here is literally the hands-on experience from being a top union official and dealing with building sites, large and small, all over the city. I would say that Conley has, for years, been talking about the need to have 3-bedroom apartments.
Yes,
but today, Walsh sort of upped the ante by issuing a broad, sweeping new proposal to overhaul the BRA, the Boston Redevelopment Authority, combine it with another agency and create a whole shebang, a whole new project called the Boston Economic Development Agency that would be much more transparent than the Imperial BRA.
And get rid of the BRA?
In effect, some people I talked to downtown said, it sounds like he wants to blow up the BRA. The Walsh campaign itself says, no, we're trying to move ahead for the 21st century. So it's very much an issue of perception.
All right, I want to bring Stephanie Wasser into the discussion. She's the executive director of the Urban Land Institute. Welcome, Stephanie. So your institute just met with both candidates. What kinds of things were they telling you?
Yes, that's the Boston, New England regional chapter. We had each candidate speak in sequence yesterday, and they spoke on a variety of subjects of the BRA and the permitting process. And I really, they're not wildly different in the sense that They both support workforce housing, economic development in the neighborhoods. Neither one of them is afraid of height and density.
That's what I was going to ask about that next.
Yeah, so they're not wildly different. I think the challenge is, how do you balance the concerns of neighborhoods with the economic opportunities that are there?
Yeah, Peter Kansas described Mayor Menino's rule over development as imperial. Maybe it was imperious. No, imperial.
No, imperial.
Imperial. But one of the things that Mayor Menino, he didn't like heights. He didn't want these big high rises and all that. He had a big hand in how this building looks. Remember, he was the one who, he said, you got to make it more interesting. So that's why we have that great LED light out there. But you talk about the density, and that would solve a lot of the problem for that kind of middle range class of people who can't afford, the luxury apartments, and they don't want to live in some of the more urban neighborhoods. But if they had high rises, it might do it.
Well, density, density is essential to making the numbers work. Plus, it makes good urban sense to make an urban space, especially when it's centered around transit. We have, one of our studies says that 30 million people are coming to this country by the year 2050 in our cities. Where are we going to put them? They're coming to Boston also. We have a huge new workforce coming in. They're young. They don't own cars. They want to be in the city. They want 24/7 activities. They don't care about smaller spaces, smaller living spaces, but they do want more open space and outdoor space. So I think the next mayor really has to be able to develop a blueprint to adapt the city to this huge influx. And density makes great urban spaces, and it's not something we should be afraid of.
You're really talking about a transportation problem when you get right down to it, and ours is an antique system.
No, it is. It's like hand in glove. And what'll be interesting is Walsh's proposal, I think, is going to really create some waves. I think it's going to get the downtown business community somewhat upset. When they think about it, they may not say it, because what Walsh is suggesting is more than just separating the planning function from the development function. He really wants to create this whole new system. Now, one thing that would be good that comes out of it is, right now there's no accountability. You want to build a giant tower. I want to build a giant tower. Mine gets okayed. No one ever finds out what happens to yours. It makes planning for transportation difficult. No one has a comprehensive vision of things.
What is your best guess on whether either one of these people is going to look back at some of the things that Mayor Menino kind of has in the pipeline, including the 30,000 units? Are they going to ramp that up? Are they going to give poor Don Chaffaro a chance to build that seaport area?
I would not hazard a guess on that at all.
I think, honestly, both of them will take a clean look at everything. First of all,
I hope they do.
Oh, I'm convinced they will. I mean, these guys are relatively straight shooters. And I think they say they're going to look at everything. They say they don't have favorites. And I think at first they won't have favorites.
I got called by a pollster last night. I don't know about you, Peter. I get them all the time. They said, which one am I going to vote for? And I said, both of them. And the guy says to me, both of them? And I said, yeah, both of them. He got confused and hung up. I think a lot of people are going to go down to the wire on them.
I think the issue with the BRA is that our members and most developers, they want more transparency and more predictability. Yeah. Because when the permitting process is not predictable, it eats up time, and time is money, and it adds more cost to the project, which makes affordability an even greater issue.
Whoever solves that's going to be a hero. All right, Stephanie Wasser, Peter Kadzis.
Thank you.